It's my distinct pleasure to introduce one of the most charismatic figures in psychedelic conversation today, Bryan Hubbard, JD of Kentucky. A moment of Bryan. Bryan is a combination of a Scottish Highland warrior, Elmer Gantry, evangelist for lbogaine. He underwent a personally extraordinary conversion with his beloved wife, Jo Alice, who will be speaking later today, and has since established the American lbogaine Initiative, speaks to legislators, was seminal in the new bill in Texas, forming the bills in Kentucky and Ohio and Mississippi. I'm glad I don't have to follow him. May I introduce, with great affection, Bryan Hubbard.
It is a sublime privilege to be up here with such fine, distinguished gentlemen as these. And let me begin by saying that after the turnip truck dropped me off here from Kentucky, I learned that the magnitude and altitude of New Mexican beauty will make a hard man humble. It has literally taken my breath away over the past 3 days. My journey to this stage began as a frightened 4-year-old child whose first memories were of screaming, cussing, and chaos between two parents whose relationship had come to an end. Through the visceral hardships of their own lives, my illiterate great-grandmother and my 2 grade school educated UMWA coal mining grandfathers were the light of love in my life, who provided the sanctuary from chaos, the stability of their affection, and an affirmation of my individual spirituality, which was my salvation in those early years. But for the gift of these people in my life, if I were here at all today, it would not be as you see me now. Having grown up in the feudalism of Appalachian coal country, where the 2 choices are to conform or to escape, I escaped. I went on to law school, where the idealized education that I had received as a child about American history and civics was quickly turned on its head as I learned that law, justice, and truth are not synonyms. I then had an accidental 16-year legal career representing Walmart, Tyson Foods, and Tennessee Valley Authority exclusively across Kentucky in years which coincided with the onset and explosion of the opioid epidemic out of central and southern Appalachia out across the rest of the country. And in that 16-year career, I learned also that law is often nothing other than the instrument that is used to bind, torture, and kill the truth by the hand that has bought the power to wield it. I came to run Kentucky's Social Security disability system, its child support enforcement system, its Office of Medicaid Fraud and Abuse Control, and then in the final stint of public service as chairman of the state's opioid commission. In 2018, I had my first encounter with the psilocybin mushroom, and then I had about another 6 to 8. Some were profoundly beautiful, others were unbelievably terrifying. They were all profoundly meaningful. And this former president of the teenage Republicans in high school, the college Republicans at George Mason University, and a child of Ronald Reagan came to conclude that these divinely engineered emancipation medications exist. to heal the wounds we inflict on ourselves and on each other. Like the individual who has tried all existing options that the system will make available in a desperate attempt to break the bonds of opioid addiction. As a custodian of the people's trust, having watched it devastate the home from which I come, the state in which I have lived, the family into which I was born. By desperation, I learned for the very first time of the word lbogaine on July 29 of 2022. And thereafter, with singular-minded purpose, I pursued the allocation of $42 million or 5% of Kentucky's settlement funds from opioid manufacturers and distributors to create a public-private partnership to drive ibogaine's approval through the FDA as a breakthrough therapeutic for addiction and trauma. We were on the threshold of success. We discovered that the support for our proposal was bipartisan, as was its opposition. And in the 11th hour of a transition between attorneys general, opposition that had been fomented by the current Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, by the University of Kentucky, was successfully executed in the termination of that project by the current Republican Attorney General of the Commonwealth. Over the past 50 years, we as a society have experienced the mass dissolution of family and community. Over the past 30 years, we have experienced the institutional criminality of systems which are supposed to protect us, but that have instead created the opioid epidemic with the detonation of OxyContin with FDA's approval in the mountains of East Kentucky on December 15th of 1995. It is the gravest humanitarian catastrophe that has unfolded within our borders since the end of the 19th century. This was followed by the 2008 financial crisis, which by most egregious example saw 52% of African American homeowners turned into tenants and made to subsidize the foreclosure and resale of their own homes out from underneath them. It is the single gravest act of coercive theft ever perpetuated at scale by a government against its own people, and a crime for which not one responsible person served the first day in jail. Followed by COVID-19 and all the calamitous consequences which we continue to struggle with to this day. And last but not least, 24 years of unmerciful war, which have taken exponentially more service member lives by suicide here at home than have been lost on battlefields abroad. Over the last 10 years, the sum total paid for this criminality has been 1.5 million lives lost to drug overdose, alcohol-related disease, and suicide, a casualty figure which exceeds the total of all soldiers killed in action in all American history combined. Here in New Mexico, you have the fourth highest suicide rate in the country. Since 2012, there has been a 120% increase in homicides, which has brought this state the designation as with the fourth highest murder rate in the country. 68% of New Mexican adults have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. This state has one of the nation's highest rates of child maltreatment and child maltreatment fatalities in the country, and is tied with Louisiana for the highest rate of childhood poverty in the country at 25%, or 1 in 4 children living in poverty. It has the 5th highest rate of drug addiction, 1 spot ahead of my home Kentucky, which has the 6th. And 84% of drug overdose deaths are among those aged 25 to 64, right in the prime of life. Right now, the United States has 102 counties with populations whose life expectancies are less than that of North Korea. Some of those are in the mountains of Kentucky, and some of those are right here in New Mexico. To make this a little more personal, when I got here Thursday night, I went just to the corner of San Francisco Street and Don Gaspar Avenue out here and met a Native American artisan by the name of Richard Chavez, who bargained me out of $40 for a beautifully made braided leather wristband. As he was haggling the cash right out of my pocket, a gentleman pulled up in his pickup truck and opened his door and just began a random conversation. And I asked that Mr. Chavez and I listen to an audio recording of his son, who was an up-and-coming recording artist who died by suicide just 5 years prior. And this man's playing of his son's music, though through the veil of joy, conveyed the profound grief that he carries with him every day. On Friday afternoon, my wife and I had to go get a few things from the Walgreens pharmacy, one of them that y'all have here in the city. And when we called for our Uber to pick us up to take us to lunch, the driver expressed amazement and explained that at the Walgreens at which we had found ourselves, it was notorious for what he described its drug-fueled violence and vagrancy. In this most enchanted of states, the most profound achievements and profound debasements of the human hand live shoulder to shoulder. I believe everyone from every kindred, tongue, and tribe across this country, most folks anyhow, recognize that we are in an existential struggle for the survival of this country. We are the inheritors of the most beautifully dynamic, multicultural society to have existed in all history. Despite all of our material wealth and technological prowess, we are living in a brutally dehumanizing era that is hostile to individual identity. Today's citizens are fungible revenue units who are plugged into a set of actuarial variables designed to reduce their lives to reasonably predictable funding streams. Massive government systems have enthroned themselves on the subjugation of powerless people. They commodify problems that they are supposed to solve by monetizing sustained human misery. Government must be made to function honestly, accountably, and responsibly to the genuine needs of the American people, or else our society will inevitably collapse beneath the enormity of its corrupt decrepitude. There must be a shift in social consciousness rooted in our universal kinship as images of our eternal Creator, whose essence is almighty, unconditional love for each of us. And having recognized that at the heart of trauma and addiction is profound spiritual affliction, mighty Texas has finished the job that was begun in Kentucky and committed $50 million as part of a public-private partnership to drive ibogaine all the way through the FDA's approval process. Its investment is the single largest public commitment to psychedelic research and medical development in history, and the first time that an individual state has ever committed funds to direct drug development through the FDA's process to address multiple concurrent public health crises within its borders, which are representative of the national reality. Texas was joined shortly thereafter by Arizona, thanks to the bold leadership of former U.S. Senator Kyrsten Sinema, who was able to secure that state's $5 million commitment for its own public-private partnership, which will supplement and complement that which is going to be proceeded in Texas. Just last week, I delivered testimony before the Mississippi State Legislature, and folks there on a bipartisan unified basis appear prepared to join in what we aim to create as the unstoppable external force of a multi-state coalition to crash through the federal wall and to create the moonshot of our time with the medicalization of ibogaine for every single person who would choose to receive its therapeutic restoration. Thanks to your leaders here who have successfully shepherded the passage of Senate Bill 219, the New Mexico Medical Psilocybin Act, the Enchanted state has now joined the emerging vanguard which aims to exalt and serve the primacy of the human soul for all of our brothers and sisters who are lethally estranged from it. By the grace of the divine hand, we will crawl the last mile to deliver good tidings unto the meek, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to all that are bound. God bless you, and God bless New Mexico.